Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Maria adjusted the blue dress, which looked very spectacular on her chiseled figure, took her time, painted her lips and smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Today is definitely my day, and he will definitely make me a proposal with celebration. She thought and confidently headed towards the exit of her room. Ever since Jacob had come into her life, she couldn't think of anything else but being with this man and the long evenings when they didn't see each other. With a sinking heart, she imagined her future life with him from their wedding, where she in a white bride's dress says yes to him to the very old age, where they, having achieved a successful career, enjoy children and grandchildren, and embracing each other and welcoming marvelous dawns. Where is this going? Is this degenerate chicken? Maria shook off the angry familiar voice and continued to button her sandals. I'm asking you, where are you going? Barely her stepfather came closer, she already smelled the pungent odor of alcohol and everything squeezed inside her. The three of them were living together. Maria better than her own mother, who loved this man so much that she didn't even believe her own daughter's tears and her confession of molestation. Maria was declared that it was her own fault for being young and dressing like a girl of easy behavior. The girl was barely 16 years old, and every day she lived carried the mark of fear. She was afraid of falling asleep too soundly and being left with Jack. Alone in the house, it was scary to even just look up and provoke him. Maria only dreamed of one thing: to meet the man of her dreams, who would take her by the hand and take her away from this hell. Her thoughts spun and took her back to where it all began a year ago. She wandered the snowy streets in front of the school. Pro shivered from the cold in her light fall jacket and thought about where she could go to warm up and pass the time until her mother came home from work. As suddenly a sharp squeal of brakes made her turn around, and a second later, she was thrown by some unknown force. She hit the ground and lost consciousness. The first thing the girl saw was the white ceiling. She glided smoothly, like a skater on ice skates, across the glossy surface, sometimes stopping to rub it. When Maria came to her senses, she heard an unfamiliar voice and turned to its source. Standing in front of her was a middle-aged woman dressed in all white, probably a nurse or a doctor, Maria thought. And then the memory mercilessly splashed all the recent events on her. The street near the school, a car at breakneck speed, students on her. How do you feel? The woman in white spoke again. What happened to me? The girl tried to raise herself a little to sit up on the bed. Her head ached and spun at the same time. Something took out her right hand, and turning her head, Maria saw a drip next to her bed and sticking in her wine medical needle. And what happened was that you were born under a lucky star, a girl, replied the nurse, coming over to adjust Maria's pillow. You were hit by a car. After a little silence, the woman in white added, the roads in our city are not sprinkled, so they're very slippery. The driver lost control, flew out onto the sidewalk, tried to turn the wheel to avoid hitting you, and crashed into a tree. Unfortunately, he was a little less lucky than you. Moderate concussion, fractures to both legs. Still, you were both born with a shirt on your back. You're young to have such adventures. It's time for you to rest, though. Sleep is your best medicine right now. You'll feel much better in a few weeks, and you'll be discharged. You'll be back with your beloved parents. We've told them, by the way, and your mom should be here soon. Now I'll give you an injection, and you'll put it in. Maria obediently sank down on the pillow. She looked up again. Her eyelids gradually became leaden. The insect began to blur and gradually disappeared. But in her mind, she kept thinking, I don't want to. I don't want to go back to this house. She dreamed of the old porch of a rustic cabin, while logs of this staircase, which uncazily stood out against the perfection of the surrounding nature. It was still early summer morning, and the first rays of sunlight were slowly creeping across the sleepy earth. Transparent drops of dew, in opera, spat on the lush green grass. The air was not yet filled with the tinkling drills of birds lying in the distance, The morning rooster's cry could be heard. Maria sat on the porch with the anticipation of a new dew. All like a flower of the day, she waited patiently for her grandmother, with whom they planned to go on a picnic in the woods. Nearby stood the girl's own wicker and basket, and a bag of sandwiches, which she had carefully assembled before dawn. "Maria, how early are you up?" "I can't wait to go to the picnic," heard the affectionate voice of her grandmother, and the girl felt a gentle touch, warm hands to her head. Alevtina Fedorovna was a tall, gray-haired woman with a rather strict character, however, in the only granddaughter Sol did not tea. With her daughter Eugenia, she almost did not communicate, since the latter tied her fate with an Alkesh dishonorable, as Maria's grandmother called him. About the native father of the girl in general, it was not customary to remember. He left them even before the birth of the little girl. Every summer Maria, so in the French manner, liked to call her Alevtina Fedorovna, spent at her place in a small village on the banks of the Oka. And these memories were especially dear, the heart, the girl. After all, maternal love and affection she never knew. Her grandmother died when Maria was 9 years old. Cindy quickly sold her little house apple orchard, in which she so loved to play. The girl gave the money to Jack, and from that moment on, an unrelenting hell began in the life of Adriana's granddaughter. Maria woke up to someone gently touching her shoulder. "Maria, wake up. How long have you been asleep?" "I've been sitting here for an hour," muttered her mother, unsuccessfully, trying to wake the girl. "Running around like a burner in the city under the wheels of cars throwing. What were you thinking?" "I just got a phone call. I almost went crazy. When I found out, I had to take off work. Now they're taking it out of my paycheck. And you know how much money we need, don't you?" Maria opened her eyes and looked at her mother. She expected neither pity nor sympathy from her. The only thought of not wanting to return to her mother's house, and why did not let her go, and continued to torment her. "I brought you something to eat." A little mollified at the sight of Maria's helplessness, Cindy spoke and put a small container of food on the table. "The doctor said you'll like you soon, and we can take you home." At the last word, Maria's heart sank, and for a second, she regretted that everything had turned out so safely. "I have to work at home too. I can't do it alone. You are a minor, and you have to be fed and clothed. Jack's been sick to his stomach a lot. I have to make fresh food for him every time. Now you'll do it. So he'll get better soon." "Mom," only I was able to squeeze out of myself the girl and turn to the wall. She was choking on tears. After a few days, the doctors allowed Maria to get out of bed, and she went to the dining room for the first time on her own. She liked the hospital food better than the food at home. Today, however, her appetite was completely absent, and she thoughtfully stirred her buckwheat porridge for the umpteenth time, never once touching it. If only it were possible to escape to some huge city with skyscrapers that rest against the clouds. I thought, "Maria, just take a train and go wherever you want. No one loves her here anyway. Only my grandmother loved me, but she died at the thought of her beloved grandmother in front of her eyes." Tears came to the girl's eyes, and by an effort of will she forced herself to stop thinking about her. But transparent droplets already flowed treacherously down her pale cheeks. "Who is it that we have here, snot on his fist?" strictly asked a dense man with a good-natured face, who was not fiddling with his written and menacing appearance. "Did you think so, David?" Maria hastily wiped her tears and smiled strangely. "It seems that I prescribed you only positive emotions and thoughts in addition to medication. Didn't I? Young lady?" The doctor didn't stop. "Mash, I understand that you are tired of being here without your family and friends. By the way, why doesn't anyone visit you? Well, forgive me for the indelicate question. In any case, soon you got better, and you won't even remember the name of your doctor. And now, good girl, have a good meal and go to your room." There you are waiting there tentatively, pushing the doorknob of your hospital room door. The first thing she felt was the slight breeze from the unlocked in her youthful stride rushed towards her and spun her around, tangling her bow and hair, tickling her face on the chair. Right beside her bed sat a man. More accurately, a very young guy. He was definitely tall. His broad shoulders obscured half of the room's window. The guy turned and looked at her. His facial features seemed very familiar to Maria. Black-colored, raven, wing, slightly waving hair over a high forehead, correct facial features and burning brown eyes. The girl lowered her gaze to his feet and shuddered. They were both in a cast. Crutches stood beside them. "You, Maria?" The man muttered embarrassedly, awkwardly, trying to raise himself up to greet her. "You've probably been told about me, about the accident that happened to us. I really wanted to see you and apologize. From the moment I came to my senses and realized that another person was hurt because of my fault and ended up in the hospital. I came as soon as the doctors let me stand up. I can't even imagine it. How do you feel? But I want to apologize to you. If you could ever forgive me." The boy spoke excitedly, and every word was difficult for him. "You're silent. What did I do to deserve this? Who would want to talk to a man who almost killed him?" he said with annoyance, and beat his right hand on one of the crutches so hard that the knuckles on his hand stood out. Maria carefully lowered herself onto the bed beside him. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "You're just as hurt as I am, even more so. You know what? This may seem strange to you, but I'm even a little grateful to you for being here." The boy looked at her in bewilderment. Maria extended her hand to him. "Let's get acquainted." Maria introduced herself. "Jacob," continuing to look at her, the man said, taking her small palm in his hand. And then a series of extraordinary days stretched on. Walks with Jacob in the hospital park. Endless late-night conversations about nothing. Cute smiley faces in messages, sweets Maria accidentally found under her pillow, and her favorite white roses on the windowsill, which Jacob claimed he had nothing to do with. "Why don't you want to go home?" One day the boy asked. His question caught Maria off guard. What makes you say that?" Maria looked so confused that Jacob put aside the side, bursting with happiness from the phone. The phone walked over to her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maria, I'm almost 30 years old. I'm old enough to understand a lot of things, even what they're talking about. Besides, your cute bra always has everything written right on it like a book. So what's going on with you? What are you so stubbornly silent about?" "Oh, baby, everything's fine." It was just the girl at first, trying to put on her usual mask of indifference, aloofness. But his hand on her shoulder was so warm, strong, a studied calmness and confidence that the lump in her throat intervening and speaking bitter pain and resentment, so deeply hidden inside, erupted into silent sobs and a whole torrent of tears. Maria had never cried even at her grandmother's funeral. She was used to being careful, obedient, diligent, obliging to anyone, but just not real and alive. Jacob hugged her gently and stroked her hair, and his shirt was all over her. Straight up deluxe. After listening carefully to her story, Jacob said firmly, "I will take you from there. Never will you suffer again." A woman's voice sounded, "Jacob," and they turned to its source, not immediately coming out of their stupor. "Jacob's son, I just got to the head doctor, and with good news. You're being discharged today, Uro." Standing in the doorway was a grown, well-groomed woman. The scent of perfume that instantly filled the hospital room. "Mom, I'd like you to meet her. This is Maria." At first it was the son, but quickly oriented herself in the situation and shamelessly movie-gaze, as if X-rayed the girl. Nancy also. Mom. Jacob impatiently interrupted son. "Gather. We have to go." Jacob, a little confused, looked at Maria and, freed from her embrace, rose from the bed, but immediately, turning around, with a smile said, "I am always with you. Do you remember?" "I remember." Immediately shown to Moshe and hurriedly left the room. Staggering, her stepfather moved towards her and with an effort threw off the shroud of memories. Maria desperately looked at herself in the large corridor, at the mirror in it reflected pale, like a shadow blonde in a blue, denuding dress with eyes widened with horror and not matching, like a cascade of hair mother was not at home and could only count on themselves. With determined steps, Jack headed toward the girl at 6, pushed with her back the front door, which obediently opened. "Where are you going, fool?" The voice sounded faintly affectionate. Maria ran out into the yard and rushed to the gate. But as luck would have it, it jammed and didn't want to open. Maria rushed to the garage. Stepfather, chuckling, followed her. The girl's gaze fell on the chainsaw plugged in. Their house was surrounded by thick woods, and Jack often used it to cut firewood. "Stay away from me." The girl grabbed the chainsaw in desperation, pushed the button. "What's going on here?" They heard the voice of Cindy, who stood behind them and looked on in horror at what was happening. "Do you see what your daughter has gotten herself into?" Instantly taking advantage of the situation, Jack shouted, "I always told you she hates me. Why? I've always been so good to her." Cindy ran up abruptly, pulled the chainsaw out of its socket, and was instantly silent. "What are you doing? You're out of your mind." Cindy's voice was shaking and hysterical. "Mom, don't you know anything?" Maria started to say, but her mother interrupted her. "You just tried to kill my favorite person in a human being. What about me, Mom?" Tears spurted from the girl's eyes. "You're not my daughter anymore. Get out of this house." Cindy was screaming. Her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees with her arms around her head and cried, "Get out." Continuing to cry, Maria pulled the wicket gate resolutely on herself and stepped out of the house. It had been summer outside for a long time. Everything around was green and blooming, but the evening's penetrating breeze made Maria lean. She walked through the woods along the road, and occasionally passing cars illuminated her with their headlights. Shoes on a small heel now, and then fell through the still soft soil after the rain. But the girl walked to the stop, not paying any attention to it. She only wanted to see and hug her Jacob as soon as possible. He would definitely save her. Maria was absolutely sure of it. "If it wasn't for Jacob, I could never have survived this," thought the girl, trying to erase from her memory the pale, hateful face of her mother. After the discharge from the hospital, Jacob and Maria did not part for a single day. He would pick up and eat school, feed her a delicious lunch, and they would take romantic walks around the city, holding hands, or went to the movies, never wondering what the session was. The guy worked in a prestigious law office, dreaming of a brilliant career in the big city. He spent a lot of time for additional training. The young man's ambition was to conquer Los Angeles, and often he and Maria would discuss at length how great it would be to live somewhere on the Los Angeles waterfront and admire the marvelous sunsets. Finally, a stop for transportation came into view. Maria sped up to catch the shuttle to the city. "I should call Jacob to meet me," the girl thought, and reached into her purse. The clutches on her waist fumbled for her passport cover. She continued to fumble in all the pockets, but at the same second, a scene of an hour ago arose in her memory, and the girl remembered with annoyance that she had forgotten her cell phone on the table in the hallway. "Nothing. I'll come to my lover myself. After all, I so today wanted to surprise him," calmed herself Maria, and turning to the window, began to watch the quickly glimmering all the forest. An hour later, she was already walking along a familiar city street. It was already dark, and the girl hurriedly turned to the right entrance. It was only a few floors up, and Maria stood at the front door where Jacob lived, having pressed the bell button a couple of times. Maria was upset that the guy was not home, but hearing the footsteps, the sound of the door lock opening, machinally tried to stroke her tangled hair. On the threshold stood Nancy, Jacob's mother. Maria had only met her a few times since the day she had first seen her at the hospital. She felt that this woman had a keen dislike for her, an origin that remained, to the girl, a mystery. "Jacob is at home?" shyly asked Maria. "What did you want?" Not at all ceremonious, asked Nancy a question. "I wanted to see him." Maria tried to pass into the apartment, but the woman, taking a step towards her, blocked the front door. "Listen to me," Girl, this is ticklish, every word uttered Jacob's mother. My son is a successful young man. He has a very bright future. And I'm not going to let some little girl with bad heredity and crazy parents ruin him. Besides, he has a fiancée. At the last word, Maria looked absent-mindedly at Nancy, disbelieving, smirked satisfied with her triumph, and the woman. She opened the door ajar so that the girl could see the living room. There was a family atmosphere at the festively set table. Father Jacob was pouring champagne into glasses. Across from him, Maria saw Jacob himself. He was laughing happily and hugging the unfamiliar girl sitting next to him, who was also smiling, slightly leaning her head against his shoulder with a stone face. Maria turned away from the door and, without waiting for the elevator, ran on foot. On the first floor, her strength left her. She sat down on the cold stairs. Her temples were pounding, her heart was pounding, and there was only one thought in her head. It couldn't be. Jacob couldn't have done this to me, but his happy face and the stranger beside him persisted in front of my eyes. It was already the 12th hour of the night, when David finished his tour of duty at the hospital. The day was very hard, and already not young man tiredly sank down on a chair. He thought glumly as he took off his medical coat. It's even scary to think how it might end. He slowly descended to the first floor, walked to the reception desk, pushed open the glass door, and greedily breathed in the fresh night air. David, the man, shuddered in surprise and turned his head to stare at the silhouette of a woman sitting on a bench outside the hospital. Maria, what are you doing here? Recognizing the girl, sternly asked the doctor. Seeing that she was shivering from the cold, he took off his visage and put it on her shoulders. Maria covered her face with her hands and cried, "Let's go. There is a 24-hour coffee shop not far away. You must be hungry. We'll have some hot tea, and you'll tell me all about it." They sat in a small cozy cafe right in the center of the city. David was smiling slightly, looking at Maria's cheese pizza. She was no longer shivering from the cold and played. The one brought by the waiter was now lying on the stove, on the chair next to the girl. "Just please don't send me home." With terror in her eyes, the girl whispered, having finished her story. "But what do you intend to do, young lady?" He looked at her anxiously over his glasses. "I have a dream." Pensively looking somewhere in the distance, said the girl. It was early morning when they stood on the platform of the train station. People were coming and going, carrying their suitcases, cheering someone when they met, crying and hugging each other before the separation. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing." David shook his head. "Life will tell if it's right or not. But you're so good to me. You know, if it hadn't been for you, I would never have made it." Maria smiled bitterly. "Don't ever say that, you hear? I want you to know that in you there is a huge indestructible strength, which will always help you in life. This will cope with any situation and further become even stronger." "Just say I'm strong," David demanded. "I am strong," said Maria, "really," in the voice of a suddenly grown-up child. "Oh, I think we have a train coming." Listening to the announcements of the station duty officer, worried the girl. "It's all right. We'll make it," said the doctor and gave Maria a small bag. "Here is some money and a cell phone for communication, in which I have already entered the contacts of my daughter. She is a medical student and lies alone. You will stay with her for the time being. Take care of yourself, young lady." A fatherly hug for David. "Thank you for everything." Maria's eyes glistened with tears, and for the first time in months, they were tears of joy. The train moved off, and Maria couldn't stop looking at her family. Once a city gradually merging with the horizon, trying to memorize it to the smallest details, until it finally disappeared into the fog. First time in Los Angeles. Several hours of silence, and the measured clatter of the wheels was suddenly interrupted by a curious voice. Across from Maria sat a full elderly woman wearing glasses and a large hat that made her look like a huge mushroom. She held a small book with a bookmark in the middle and smiled as she looked at the girl. Maria nodded, and the mushroom grandmother continued. "My children and grandchildren all live in Los Angeles. And what did they find there? It's not clear. who studies, who works. Good for them. I got to travel all the time. I spend half my life on the road. Well, how can I not see blood? They want me to move in with them. But how can I leave my town? And my mom's all alone. You have to help her. She's the dearest person in the world. Why did only your father see you off? Suddenly, her grandmother looked at Maria with curiosity. Maria looked at her in confusion, thinking what to say. But they were interrupted by the conductor who entered the compartment. In his hands, he held a tray with several glasses of tea and solemnly announced Los Angeles. 20 minutes later, Grandma lit up. Gathering her things spread out on the bed into a large bag on top. Stepping out of the train car, Maria found herself in a huge, noisy, as if living train station. She was a little confused. She pulled out her cell phone and called her daughter David. Emily was older than Maria. She was in her 3rd year of medical school. I'm going to be a 4th-generation doctor, she said proudly. When I was a kid, my dad always took me to the hospital with him, and my favorite toy was a children's suitcase with medical instruments. First, I treated dolls and my soft toys. Then I got to my household and friends in kindergarten. Emily laughed. What do you plan to do? She asked the girl. I graduated from school with a gold medal and plan to go to university. I always dreamed of becoming a psychologist and helping people, answered Maria. That's great. So we're almost colleagues. Your mom must be proud. Emily was embarrassingly silent. I'm sorry, my dad told me all about you. You're a very strong girl. They drove to Emily's house in silence and stopped at the entrance of the high-rise building. Noticing Maria, surprisingly, Emily winked. You haven't seen Los Angeles in person yet. They went up to the 21st floor and opened the front door with the key and found themselves in a spacious multi-level studio with panoramic chalk windows. Maria involuntarily admired the view of Los Angeles. For a moment, it seemed to her that she was asleep, and it simply could not be in reality. She was about to be awakened, and she would find herself back in Colorado, in the same house. Where was Maria? What are you doing up? Hurry up and sit down, and let's eat breakfast. Emily was in full swing on the bed, on the chair on which there were already 2 cups of fragrant coffee on a plate, appetizingly arranged croissants with ham and cheese. Oatmeal porridge was cooking on the stove. Emily, tell me honestly, I won't embarrass you if I live here for a while. I plan on getting a job and a place to live. I've got the whole summer ahead of me. I have to get ready for university. I'm very grateful to you. But I realize very well that I won't be able to use your kindness all the time. And it's time for me to start taking care of myself, Maria said thoughtfully. Maria, don't hurry. You can stay for any period of time. And I assure you that you will not be a burden to me. You know, I'm an extrovert. I need companionship all the time. And honestly speaking, I'm a little sad. Emily's one persuasive voice. Anyway, you get settled in. I have to go to university. I have hospital duty tonight. Tomorrow we can spend the whole day together. I'll show you around Los Angeles. Your bed's upstairs, bathroom, clean towels. In the closet you can take any clothes you want and change. The girl grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. Thank you again, Maria smiled. She slowly drank her coffee. She took a shower and changed her clothes, finding the simplest long-sleeve dress in her closet. Sitting down on the wide windowsill, Maria pulled out her cell phone and downloaded several job search apps at once. Immediately putting the filter without experience, she delved into studying the vacancies. There were many options: waiters, administrators, salespeople, consultants, operators of checkout points at Marketplace. They're signed up for several interviews. The girl began to study the conditions of admission to several universities at once. It was well past 12 o'clock when she put aside her cell phone glance. Her again fell on the beautiful landscape outside the window. Deciding to take a little walk, Maria left the house and walked towards the embankment. Many times she had seen this city in photos and videos, but now the sight was so mesmerizing that she stopped every now and then and marveled at the harmonious combination of ancient architectural monuments and modern buildings. How quaintly intertwined were the stone jungle and ancient streets with the green oasis of parks. Dusk began to descend on Los Angeles, and the city glittered with the shimmer of multicolored lights. Reaching the waterfront, Maria took a seat on a bench. A small boat sailed past, with loud music playing on board. On the deck danced passengers, and seeing Maria, waved their hands and greeted her. The girl waved back, and suddenly her gaze fell on a tall, dark, bald guy, whose facial features seemed to her very similar to those of Jacob. Her heart suddenly sank. Breathless, she gazed more and more intently at the faintly lit silhouette. This can't be, Maria thought, not taking her eyes off the man. But then someone called his name loudly. It wasn't Jacob. A longing filled her soul. The memory she had so carefully hidden in the corners of her mind suddenly came flooding back to her. Where have you been? I called, you didn't pick up. Emily was surprised. It was getting dark. When Maria opened the door, entered the apartment, the girl was sitting in the kitchen. I'm sorry, my phone died. I walked around Los Angeles. It's just extraordinary. Maria smiled with admiration. They began to leisurely cook and dinners, sharing events and impressions from the past day. Emily woke up early in the morning to appetizing smells, coffee, and fresh pastries. Good morning. You're having breakfast. I baked pancakes. Maria smiled. She was already dressed, as if she was going to leave the house any minute. Why are you up so early? I have the day off today. I wanted to sleep in and go for a walk around Los Angeles. I'm gonna have to cancel. I have 3 job interviews. Maria poured coffee. Oh, that's too bad. Then I'll wait for you at home. We have a party planned with my friends tonight. You remember, don't you? Emily yawned and reluctantly got out of bed. Maria walked out of the house into the street. A warm summer rain had just fallen, and the air was fresh and moist. Rainbows were colorful on the horizon, and the rays of the sun were breaking through the green noise of this branch of foliage. Having built a route in her phone, the girl quickly descended into the subway, deftly maneuvering between the chaotically moving crowd of people. Maria ran into the last subway car and sat down on the vacated seat. If I follow the time clearly, I will be able to pass the interview in 3 different neighborhoods of Los Angeles before the evening. The girl thought, and updated her resume on the website again. Entering a huge shopping center, Maria quickly oriented herself by the signs, went up to the 3rd floor, and turned into a large chain stores of cosmetics and perfumes. Good afternoon. Where do you have an interview for the position of sales consultant here? She addressed the girl at the cash register through. She was already sitting in a small windowless office, trying to cope with her excitement. Maria began to look at a large stand with a bottle and a box, and a bottle of different volumes and sizes. Good afternoon. Do you have your resume with you? A tall, slender woman in a gray suit entered the office. I can't find your resume on the website. She turned on her computer, put on her glasses, and started going through the candidate files again. Yes, to be honest, I can pretty much voice what it says. I graduated from high school with honors, and I'm preparing for university. I haven't worked anywhere yet. The woman raised her head and looked at Maria carefully. So you have no work experience at all? Yes, but I'm a very easy learner. Maria became very nervous, and her voice trembled. The woman shook her head and took off her glasses. Tatiana, I can't accept you for this position. I'm Maria. I apologize, Maria. But I really can't take you on. Of course, we have training and internships, but I assume that the candidate has at least minimal experience. Maria left the mall a little upset, but how do people get that experience? They are not born with it. With annoyance, the girl thought. With hopefulness, she went to the 2nd interview, walking along the embankment. Maria every now and then checked with the navigator. In front of the girl hovered huge buildings, which she had previously seen only on the internet. Their tops were lost somewhere in the clouds, and the mirror surface was blind under the sun. Wow, it's beautiful here, and how different Los Angeles is, Maria thought, remembering the small streets of Pokrovka with its cozy janitors. To some it is friendly and accommodating, and to some it does not give a single chance, continued mentally philosophizing. The girl reached the desired address and began to go up on the high-speed elevator, which took her breath away on the 43rd floor. The elevator stopped and Maria hurriedly opened the website to see the number of the office where the interview was taking place. Standing near the door was a pretty girl in jeans and a fat girl with long loose hair, looking like Rapunzel from a cartoon. "Are you being interviewed?" Rather smiling broadly, she hurried to Maria. Maria found herself in a large conference room with panoramic chalk windows. In the center stood a white plastic board with multicolored markers. Next to it stood quite a large number of chairs arranged in several rows. The girl took an empty seat. "Are you at the interview too?" A young girl with big frightened eyes sat beside her. In her hands she nervously twirled her cell phone. "Attention, we begin," loudly spoke Rapunzel, and clapped her hands, attracting everyone's attention. "I want to introduce you the director of our company, James. Let's welcome." In the hall there were liquid claps and silence. "I can't hear you." The girl from the cartoon, waving her long hair. "Doesn't anyone here need a job?" A man in his 40s in a brown suit and a white shirt that was so tight on his big belly that it looked like it was about to burst. "We are all here to make things happen." James began his speech, stretching his words. "There is no ceiling on revenue in the company of which I am a director. Working a regular job, you will always be limited by your salary. I am here to teach you how to make big money and create your own business." "I don't understand." On the phone I was told that the vacancy here is on a competitive basis, and here they are talking about some kind of business. The girl with big brown eyes whispered in bewilderment. "Now the whole world has moved online, and I will teach you how to create your own business and how to develop it later." "And can we get to the point? What is required of us?" A man in the front row couldn't stand it after 20 minutes of the director's promising speech. "You need to take a training course where I and my staff will help you create your own store online and get your first income. There is a fee for the training." Questions were heard from everywhere. "You must realize that free cheese only comes in a mousetrap." "The hands of a pot-bellied man. But I promise you that very soon you will be able to earn your first big money." A rumble of disgruntled voices went up. One by one, people began to get up and leave. A cry came from the eyes. Maria's roommate also got up and hurriedly headed for the exit. When there was no one left in the room, and James and Rapunzel were gesticulating vigorously, discussing something animatedly, Maria approached them. "How much does this training cost?" She looked questioningly at the director. "What is your name?" "Girl?" asked James and looked at her interestedly. "Come sit down, Maria." The man gestured her to a chair and sat down next to her. "The tuition is $3,000, but I think it's a life-changing investment that will pay for itself in the first few months of your business. But I don't have that kind of money. I'm looking for a job on my own. Perhaps your parents or friends will help you. Will you be able to break even soon?" "I'm sorry, it doesn't suit me." Maria got up and walked resolutely towards the exit. What kind of day is today? She thought with despair as she headed for the interview. You need either experience or money, and I have neither. There is always hope. I will definitely find a job, she reassured herself. When she got to Arbetskaya, she got out of the subway and immediately saw a restaurant with a beautiful facade. Going inside, she approached the bartender and said that the restaurant manager was waiting for her. At the interview, a young man asked about the cathedral counter. Maria nodded affirmatively, and in front of everyone not far away began to wait and curiously looked at the fancy interior of the establishment. You must be Maria. A short, middle-aged woman approached. Come with me. They entered the door with assigned staff room and, walking down a dark corridor, found themselves in a small, cozy office, a large safe, and a leather armchair. A woman introduced herself. My name is Christina. I am the manager of the restaurant. Please tell me about yourself, Maria, she asked. If you don't mind, I lit a cigarette, and without waiting for an answer, she pulled out a small red purse, as you already know. My name is Maria. I graduated with honors and I can't find a job. Experience is required everywhere, said Maria, and then mentally regretted her last words. You can't say that at a job interview. You should present yourself at your best, not complain. She thought. Christina looked at her carefully and puffed on her cigarette. Why, no experience in anything at all. She thought for a moment. The thing is, we need a hostess. Your looks are very good, Maria. But understand, we have an elite restaurant complex, and this position implies not only a beautiful face and figure, as well as a clear knowledge of etiquette, rules of communication with guests, and sufficient stress resistance. After all, the door to the office opened abruptly, and on the threshold appeared a very tall, well-groomed man with long blonde hair, gathered in a ponytail. On his face read barely concealed irritation. Christina, what the hell is this batch of seafood? He began, and instantly fell silent. Seeing Maria in the office, and you are not alone, even more annoyed, he muttered. Maria is already leaving. Really, Maria realized, replied Christina. Maria, barely holding back tears, rose from her chair, said goodbye, and went out into the corridor. Working a regular job, you will always be limited by your salary. I am here to teach you how to make big money and create your own business. I don't understand. On the phone, I was told that the vacancy here is on a competitive basis, and here they are talking about some kind of business. The girl with big brown eyes whispered in bewilderment. Now the whole world has moved online, and I will teach you how to create your own business and how to develop it later. And can we get to the point? What is required of us? A man in the front row couldn't stand it after 20 minutes of the director's promising speech. You need to take a training course where I and my staff will help you create your own store online and get your first income. There is a fee for the training. Questions were heard from everywhere. You must realize that free cheese only comes in a mousetrap, the hands of a pot-bellied man. But I promise you that very soon you will be able to earn your first big money. A rumble of disgruntled voices went up. One by one, people began to get up and leave. A cry came from the eyes. Maria's roommate also got up and hurriedly headed for the exit. When there was no one left in the room, and James and Rapunzel were gesticulating vigorously, discussing something animatedly, Maria approached them. How much does this training cost? She looked questioningly at the director. What is your name? Girl? Asked James and looked at her interestedly. Come sit down, Maria. The man gestured her to a chair and sat down next to her. The tuition is $3,000. But I think it's a life-changing investment that will pay for itself in the first few months of your business. But I don't have that kind of money. I'm looking for a job on my own. Perhaps your parents or friends will help you. Will you be able to break even soon? I'm sorry, it doesn't suit me. Maria got up and walked resolutely towards the exit. What kind of day is today? She thought with despair as she headed for the interview. You need either experience or money. And I have neither. There is always hope. I will definitely find a job, she reassured herself. When she got out of the subway and immediately saw a restaurant with a beautiful facade. Going inside, she approached the bartender and said that the restaurant manager was waiting for her. At the interview, a young man asked about the cathedral counter. Maria nodded affirmatively, and in front of everyone not far away began to wait and curiously looked at the fancy interior of the establishment. You must be Maria. A short, middle-aged woman approached. Come with me. They entered the door with assigned staff room and, walking down a dark corridor, found themselves in a small, cozy office, a large safe, and a leather armchair. A woman introduced herself. My name is Christina. I am the manager of the restaurant. Please tell me about yourself, Maria, she asked. If you don't mind, I lit a cigarette, and without waiting for an answer, she pulled out a small red purse, as you already know. My name is Maria. I graduated with honors and I can't find a job. Experience is required everywhere, said Maria, and then mentally regretted her last words. You can't say that at a job interview, You should present yourself at your best, not complain, she thought. Christina looked at her carefully and puffed on her cigarette. Why, no experience in anything at all. She thought for a moment. The thing is, we need a hostess. Your looks are very good, Maria. But understand, we have an elite restaurant complex, and this position implies not only a beautiful face and figure, as well as a clear knowledge of etiquette, rules of communication with guests, and sufficient stress resistance. After all, the door to the office opened abruptly, and on the threshold appeared a very tall, well-groomed man with long blonde hair, gathered in a ponytail. On his face read barely concealed irritation. "Christina, what the hell is this batch of seafood?" he began, and instantly fell silent. Seeing Maria in the office, "And you are not alone," even more annoyed, he muttered. "Maria is already leaving." "Really?" Maria realized, replied Christina. Maria, barely holding back tears, rose from her chair, said goodbye, and went out into the corridor. When she left the restaurant, she took slow steps toward the subway. The lump in her throat made it hard to breathe. She sat at an empty bus stop, covered her face with her hands, and sobbed without fear of being seen. Black mascara ran down her cheeks, and Maria wiped away the tears, smearing the makeup even more. The day was not going well. She heard a familiar male voice. The same man who had burst into Alexandra's office without knocking was standing right next to her. 5 minutes ago, without answering anything. Maria pulled a small mirror out of her bag and tried to tidy herself up. "What a polite girl." The man laughed, taking out of the inner pocket of his jacket a small package of wet wipes. Handed them to Maria. "My name is Sam. Can just be a word," he said. Seated himself next to her. "Maria," quietly spoke the girl, without looking at him. "Look, I'm not going to play psychologist. Were you asking me what happened? Maybe I can guess. Frankly, I can help you, provided you confirm my guesses, of course. So I suggest we sit somewhere nice and talk, if you'd like, of course. But how can you help me?" Maria finally came to her senses and looked curiously at the man. "You know," in the process, Sam gestured towards the wide avenue. "There is a very cozy cafe here, where you can talk quietly." At the sight of the girl's confusion, he pulled out a passport from the same inner pocket and opened the first page. "I would like to introduce myself. Sam, owner of a chain of Los Angeles restaurants and nightclubs." They were sitting in a small hookah lounge near the center. Tired of the long, emotionally exhausting day, today Maria drank fragrant tea with Witness's interesting purple color and carefully choosing words, talking about herself. "It's like I'm at a job interview again." The girl smiled and embarrassedly defaulted. "You can just say a word." He deeply inhaled, standing on the table hookah. "So, what do we have?" Summarized the man, releasing upward perfectly rounded rings of smoke. "A talented man who can't find a job and is not hired anywhere just because of his lack of experience." "I got it right." The girl nodded affirmatively. "Maria, what if I offer you one quite interesting place with a good income? It's tuition-free, or there's a catch in something else." Maria blurted out. Sam laughed out loud. "It seems that you had a negative experience. But let's not talk about it. What I offer is quite legal and brings good profit. All right, let's call it a salary. It'll make you feel better, right? So, as I said earlier, I own a chain of restaurants and nightclubs. I'm the owner, and I'm offering you a job. It's an undercover waiter. Let's call it. Okay, you serve the guests, but you offer them expensive liquor, expensive food. If they ask for a drink, you can sit with them for a while. You're paid a percentage of every meal or drink the customer buys. What do you say? It's like an escort service." Maria said fearfully and started to get out of her chair. Sam laughed again. "Here's my advice. Read less stupid articles on the internet." But the girl, having already grabbed her purse, cut him off. "Sam, thank you, but I'm not interested. Have a nice stay." She pushed back her chair, trying to get out. Sam hurriedly pulled a business card out of his wallet and held it out to Maria. "You take it. Think about it. If you need my help, just give me a call." "Seriously," he said, helping the girl out. It was already dusk when Maria stepped out of the subway and headed towards Emily's house. Barely Maria opened the door with her key, she heard music playing loudly. Maria exclaimed happily to Emily when she saw the girl appear in the door. "But where have you been walking for so long?" "We're in the middle of a party. Come and join us." Around the table, there was a group of familiar young men and women. They were talking about their own things and laughing merrily. "Oh, what a blonde," whistled a young man standing next to Emily and extended his hand to Maria. "Let's get acquainted. I'm Mike." Maria reluctantly gave her hand and nodded politely. "What's wrong?" Taking the girl aside from the intrusive male attention, Emily asked. "I had a lot to tell you." Lowering her voice, Maria said, "But to summarize, not a good day." "Oh, relax, baby. You'll tell me tomorrow. You're alive and well. That means everything's okay. What's with the sad face? Let's have some fun. Have a couple of cocktails and you'll be fine." "Stompy, look, Mike, he likes you. And he's the son of rich parents, by the way. Be nice to him. Maybe you won't have to work at all." Then, with a drunken giggle, I winked at the girl. "We have an aversion to the smell of alcohol since childhood." Maria flared up with renewed vigor, and a little standing in the general company for propriety, she stealthily slipped out on the landing. The girl crouched on a cold step and lost her whiskers. Her mind was a hurricane of thoughts and emotions after the previous day. The loud sounds of music and cheerful shouts of the company did not let Maria calm down and concentrate. Deciding to breathe a little fresh night air, Maria entered the elevator and, after a little thinking, pressed the button of the top floor. Another flight of stairs to the technical floor, and she pushed the door leading to the roof. To Maria's great surprise and joy, the door swung open slightly. The girl's breath was taken away by the gust of wind and the view of glittering Los Angeles at night. From a bird's eye view, it was all transmitted by lights, like a Christmas tree leaning with her back against the wall. The girl quietly admired the beauty that had become her view. "I hope today is not a good time to commit suicide." She heard an ironic male voice behind her. "At least wait until tomorrow." She shuddered in surprise. Maria turned around and saw one of the guys present at the party she had escaped from. How did you find me?" The girl was surprised. "And what does tomorrow have to do with it?" "It's very simple. I noticed that you are not very cheerful at this holiday. And when you ran away, I looked out into the corridor and saw you going upstairs. And now that I've already witnessed a possible suicide, I can't leave you here. And I'll have to talk you out of it long and hard." "What makes you think I'm gonna jump?" Maria, starting to lose your patience. "No. Oh, then I'm cool. I hate to change people's minds." The young man smiled broadly and extended Maria's hand to Thomas. "Let's get acquainted." Maria, very tired from socializing today, nodded faintly and shook the guy's hand. "Maria, are you also an extra at this celebration of life?" "To be honest, I'm not a big fan of noisy parties." Thomas sighed. "I prefer a private conversation or reading a book." Noticing that Maria was shivering from the cold, he took off his jacket and threw it over her shoulders. "What do you like?" "I also like to read books and socialize. I dream of becoming a psychologist to help people," the girl replied, not stopping to admire the night landscape. "It's really beautiful here," she smiled. Night Los Angeles is irresistible, looking not at the landscape at all, but at the point profile. The girls agreed. "Thomas, I am very new here," admitted Maria. "Then I invite you on a little adventure." Thomas winked at the conspirators. "Maria, you've got something to lose." Emily struggled to get out of bed and headed for the refrigerator. "I think it's a pretty good offer." "Yeah, it's not like working in a fancy office on the 5th floor of a building, but you gotta start somewhere." She took the mineral water out of the fridge and drank greedily from the neck of the bottle. "God, what a headache. And why did I drink so many cocktails? And you know, I'm a little sorry that I immediately burst out and ran away, without listening to Sam." Maria sat in front of the mirror and with deft hand movements, paid a French braid. Of course, this is a nightclub and working at night, but I still think it pays well. Plus, I'll have time during the day to keep studying for my exams. Speaking of yesterday, you know the dark-haired guy well. What's his name? Thomas. I think Maria pretended to try to remember what he liked. Emily turned around and looked at her friend with interest. No, it's just that he followed me up to the roof. The girl was embarrassed. Wow, you also had a romance on the roof. Emily laughed. Emily, stop it. Nothing happened. Maria laughed too and threw a wooden pillow at her friend. They were so far apart that they didn't notice that they had made a mess in the apartment. I'm glad your work and personal life are getting better. Oh, Maria, there are 1 million opportunities to be happy in Los Angeles. The key is not to miss them. So your shift will start at 10:00 p.m. and end at 6:00 a.m. Will you ever be fired if you're late? I only hired you at Sam's request. If you don't live up to his trust, I'll say goodbye without the slightest regret. Already familiar to Maria, Manager Christina delivered the information sensitively, as if finishing every word. Your job is to sell the most expensive alcohol and appetizers possible. If the client, you can sit with them at the table. That's a wish, she added, seeing the girl's startled looks. First, you'll go through several internships, where you'll learn all the rules of etiquette and communication with the guests of the club. But remember, the main thing is by no means. Whatever happens, you have no right to be rude to guests or disrespectful to them. The dress code is simple deep cleavage and an extremely short skirt. If you're clear, you can start your internship. Nancy will teach you everything. She glanced at a petite girl with a short haircut wearing a brightly colored top that looked more like a swimsuit elevator. After hours of internships, Maria was walking around when her phone rang. Who is it? Hearing an unfamiliar male voice in the receiver, she asked. It's Thomas. You and I used to walk on the rooftops, he said. Yes, I remember. The girl smiled. You slowed down, laughed the voice in the phone. Only now I suggest a water walk instead of a roof. It'll be fun. Where are all the other people? Maria wondered. When he and Thomas went up on the deck of the small boat, there was not a single person in sight except the captain of the boat. Ah, this is nice, she exclaimed when she saw a small table and the small server for two, on which an exquisite bouquet of white roses was arranged. A large plate of juicy strawberries stood out a bright red spot on the snow-white tablecloth. And me nice, filled with all kinds of appetizers of cheeses, dried fruits, and nuts. They caught my eye. I guessed the colors. Thomas asked hopefully, pouring the champagne into glasses. Of course, said the girl, and when she saw the champagne in her glass, she exclaimed hurriedly, Oh no, thank you. I don't drink. Then, at least pretending to drink, laughed the young man and gestured to invite Maria to the table. They chatted and laughed casually, and wonderful views of the temple floated past them, illuminated by the different colors of the park's alleys. So you're a doctor? Maria bought the champagne lightly and set the glass on the table. Yes, I'm a cardiologist. I knew from childhood that I would be a doctor. My father died of a heart attack when I was only 11 years old. And then I made a promise to myself that when I grew up, I would definitely go to medical school and save as many lives as I could. And you know, that childhood vow gave me strength when it seemed to be running out. First college, then university. My mom was alone, and it was hard on us. But now, I'm so grateful to her for everything. She is the closest person to me. Maria had tears in her eyes. What's wrong, Maria? I upset you. The boy got worried. Are you all pale? No, I'm fine. Just very touching what you tell from all. Her emotions were difficult to breathe, and for the first time since Jacob's betrayal, a warm feeling of deep sympathy for the man gradually filled her heart. Then I suggest we continue our conversation about the meaning of life on the second floor of the cabin. The view up there is incredible. Give me your hand, lady. They stood on the roof and admired the sunset, which, like a talented artist, painted Los Angeles in all shades of red and pink. Thomas put his arm around Maria's shoulders. She felt the warmth of his body. It seemed to her as if his serene calm and confidence were now flowing through her living quarters. "What will you order?" Maria smiled studiously, and with an awkward movement of her hand, she tried to pull back high-collared and already short skirt. Today was her first shift, and she felt out of place. The girl was constantly overcome with doubts. It was only by an effort of will that she kept herself from running away from this place. At first, the working shift was only a few hours, and it seemed to her that she had been working here for a week, like a robot, smiling and giving out carefully memorized to communicate with customers, phrases and names of changes in the bar list. Maria mentally reassured herself that she would soon get used to it and would stop noticing the deafeningly playing music, bright light flashes, and drunken men and women. "You don't move awkwardly on the dance floor, Ooh. I see you've gotten the hang of it." Oh called her familiar voice. The girl in her hands was heavy under the nose with drinks, and she, trying not to drop anything, carefully turned around. In front of her, smiling, stood Sam. He was dressed in a black silk shirt and light beige jeans. Sam shamelessly scrutinized her in the semi-darkness of the club, stopping his gaze at her breasts, then at the mini skirt that hid little. "I didn't know where to put my embarrassment." Maria hurriedly left, saying that her clients were waiting for her. It was already dawning when Maria finished her shift and, having changed into cozy jeans and soft crickets, left the nightclub. Turning from the main street to the subway, the girl went down the steps and, taking out headphones, immersed herself in classical music. What an escape after the rumble of dance music. "I think I will never be able to listen to the club genre again," Maria thought. A few months of her stay at the new job had already passed, and the girl began to slowly get used to it. But her habit was of a more humble nature. At work, she tried not to stand out and dressed modestly whenever possible. She knew her duties by heart. There was only a little more to go, the girl said to herself through gritted teeth. Every day was similar to the previous one. In the morning, she returned from the club, set the alarm clock, and went to bed. Exactly at 12 o'clock to the elevator, in herself a huge cup of American. Maria would sit down at her psychology textbooks and study until late afternoon. Then she would hurriedly get ready for work. It was Groundhog Day all over again. An endless vicious circle, in the midst of which a bright flash blinded memories. Her call to Thomas and a shout of joy. "I got in. I passed the scores, enrolled his bottom one. I was sure of it." And these moments filled her soul with such infinite joy that it seemed as if she could work for another 10 years. In such stifling conditions, Maria took the elevator. Tired, joined the door. She opened her purse, took out the key, and turned it in the keyhole. At this time, Emily was always asleep, and the girl was very surprised to see that the lights were on in the apartment and the water was running noisily in the bathroom. She went to the door and tried to listen. Suddenly, the door opened sharply, and right at the meeting to her came out a completely naked elderly man. From surprise and fright, Maria screamed loudly, "But shush. Now the neighbors will run away." The exquisite Emily appeared from the room and handed the man towels, which he immediately turned to meet William. As if nothing had happened, she continued, unable to bury a word. Maria silently sat down on the windowsill and looked at the passers-by hurrying to work. William, taking advantage of the momentary pause, dressed quickly and made his way to the front door. Seeing how he slapped the ass of Emily, who came to see him off, Maria hurriedly looked away. "Do you love him?" asked the girl, when the door closed behind the night guest. "What?" Emily first stared at her friend with bewilderment, then threw back in her head, laughed. "Maria, are you really a saint? You don't understand. You're not with your brain. Why does a married man come here at night? And how did I get this fancy apartment and car? You think I earned it at the hospital. Or maybe you think I used the same money to buy brand-name clothes and fly to Bali. But he is 30 years older than you," Maria said sadly. "Not all of us are princesses like you." Emily said angrily. "We have been dating since I came to conquer the capital." "Emily, I'm sorry. It's really none of my business. You do what you think is right, and no one has the right to take life from you." "Okay, bygones." Emily softened. "You'd better show me the ring." Maria stretched out a long, graceful hand, where on the ring finger shone a gold ring with a neat stone in the middle of the voice with a diamond. "The prize," whistled Emily. "When the wedding, next summer, probably. But the subject says he wants to marry me as soon as possible, even if I don't want to wait that long." "Maria, you're crazy. A man as resourceful as your Thomas should marry himself right away, or some bitch will come along and steal him away." "Oh, Emily, is it irredeemable?" Maria laughed. "He likes homely, modest girls. He's very fond of coziness himself. We dream of a big house, to have many children. He and I have the same outlook on life. We hardly ever fight. Only about my work. Thomas is totally against working in a nightclub. He says that he would not want me to work at all when I become his wife. That, as they say, to create a family coziness and meet him from work, shared with a friend Maria. Not a man, but just a fairy tale. And you know, if it went so revelations, I also need to tell you something. I think I fell in love too," Emily whispered dreamily and stretched sweetly. "With whom, William?" Maria was surprised. "Very funny," stepped the girl. "No, of course not. How can one love that old man? My favorite man is young, promising, and quite serious. At least he's showing his serious intentions towards me, even though we've only been dating for a short time. So maybe things will work out soon, and I'll become a wife too," giggled the girl. "And you will stay with William?" Maria asked. "What else? And give up all the benefits. What does he give me? I won't leave him, even if a rich sheikh marries me. You never have too much in life. You know, friend. By the way, why don't we introduce our men? We'll be family friends." Today was the celebration of the next anniversary of the establishment, which was announced in all the media. It was late Saturday night, and the party was gaining momentum. The club was filling up with people very quickly. At the entrance, there was a long queue for face control. Nearby, there was a whole park of luxury cars and VIP guests of the club. DJs were warming up the audience as much as they could, and brightly colored go-go girls entertained the visitors with their artificial dances. In the center stood a huge pyramid of glasses and snow-white tablecloth, and everywhere reigned atmosphere, looseness, and the feeling of eternal celebration of life. All the guests, as well as the staff, from the manager to the waiters, were dressed in all white. Maria panted, ran into the staff room, and hurriedly began to take off her jeans to change into the uniform of the establishment. "Where do you even wear?" The manager, Christina, asked angrily when she saw her and tossed her some shiny bag. "Your shift starts in 5 minutes. Couldn't you have come early for this party? I have time for everything," Maria answered calmly. When she opened the package, she was surprised to find a very short white dress in it. "What is this?" "I'm not wearing it." "It's your holiday uniform, Maria, in case you haven't noticed. It's our club's 5th anniversary, and everyone's wearing white. And you're hoping to be just like all the other girls. And if you're not happy, you can write a letter of resignation in imitation." From here at that very minute, Christina angrily flashed her eyes, turned around, and left the room. "Your shift starts in exactly 4 minutes. It came from down the hall. With a heavy sigh, Maria pulled a small white dress out of the bag, quickly pulled it over her head. She shifted her gaze to the large wall mirror, and aghast. The dress was made of thick fabric. Because of the tall height of the girl seemed just extremely short. It was complemented by an obscenely deep cleavage. "Oh no. No way, I will not wear this outfit of a prostitute," thought Maria with disgust, pushing herself white shiny fabric. It took another minute to change into her casual uniform, tying a ponytail of her long blonde hair as she went. Maria almost ran into the main hall of the club. "Maria, where's your dress?" Christina will kill you with amazement, recognized partner Nancy. Seeing her in the usual clothes on Nancy was the same white dress, which, strangely enough, looked on her more modest. But this was more than compensated for by the brightly colored makeup with gaudily red lips. In her ears were shiny long earrings, tassels. There's a lot of people out tonight. Look at the guests at those VIP tables. They're generous. Nancy winked, showing a few tightly rolled $100 bills. The ones on the left are mine. You can have the rest, Nancy. Maria exhaled sharply, and headed confidently toward the VIP tables. Suddenly, someone grabbed her arm and Maria shrieked a little in surprise. They're all fucked up. I hissed in her ear, Christina driving her to the side. I thought I warned you, but you chose to do it your way again. So I'll tell you with great pleasure, you're fired. Get out of here. Out of anger, Christina raised her voice, and several of our nearby dancing guests turned on her. What's all the fuss? But there's no fight. A mocking male voice was heard. They turned at the same time and saw Sam approaching through the window. From surprise, Christina released Maria's hand on her wrist, which immediately began to redden. Sam, Maria refused to wear her holiday uniform, spoke impertinently to me, and I'm firing her. Christina began her speech in a voice full of dignity, but did not pay any attention to her. Sam put his arm around Maria's shoulders and pulled her toward his office. Christina threw freely, without turning her head. Maria, what exactly confused you about the participation dress? Asked the director as they entered his office. It is very vulgar. You know it yourself, replied the girl from crossing her arms over her chest. In my opinion, on the contrary, it is stunning and will suit you very well. It will emphasize your beauty, said Sam, approaching Maria closely. Seeing that the girl staggered, Sam turned and walked to a large built-in closet. Opening it, he pulled out a white shirt from there. Holding it out to Maria, he said, I think we'll come to a compromise. Put it on top of the dress and finished it with Natalia's knot. That way you'll look in the festive style of our club and stop being self-conscious. What are we standing here for? Quickly change and get to work. Baby, he commanded and opened the office door for Maria. I thought you were fired. Did you see that bitch dragging you out? Nancy was surprised. When her partner showed up, a minute later, Maria was standing in front of the guests, smiling dazzlingly. Can I offer you something special from drinks or maybe appetizers? In a polite voice, she asked. At the table sat a man and a red-haired girl. All of them were openly looking at the girl from head to toe, and Maria tried to discreetly pull the short hem of her dress lower. Beautiful long legs, stated the gray-haired man, with a beard spread out in a leather armchair to smoke a hookah. And there's nothing to be shy about. What's your name? Maria, the girl replied lightly. He motioned her to a chair and gestured, invited her to sit down. My name is Chuck, and these are my friends. Maria, if you would be so kind as to grace our evening with your presence. The girl sitting across from him shook her lips contemptuously and turned away. Maria sat down in the chair, and Chuck opened the menu. What do you recommend as a local expert? Smiling, he asked, sitting closer to her. I want to order all the items on the menu. After a brief discussion, a man announced as the waiter approached their table and the most expensive champagne the bar had for Maria. The friends seated at the table raised their heads in surprise at Chuck. I don't drink alcohol. Maria blushed with embarrassment. You'll have to. A man sitting across from Chuck with a cigar laughed. Why did it fall out of his mouth? Maria got up from the chair and, apologizing, headed for the ladies' room. Where are you going? When she came out as if from under the ground, Sam appeared in front of her. Maria, you made a big score. Chuck, I'm thrilled with you. He texted me that he doesn't want you to leave tonight. So don't leave the table and run away from him in the hall. You don't actually own me. Maria glared at me. Of course not. Girl. Reconciliatory began Sam, and his voice sounded a little ingratiating. You can do whatever you want. Just spend the evening with him. And then it's up to you. The fun had already reached its peak. The waiters were turning up their noses, and the bartenders were stirring cocktails nonstop. Only white parts of people's clothes and their white teeth and smiles flashed on the dance floor. Flashes of gunfire sparingly picked out of the darkness faces, hands, burning eyes, distorted figures of kissing couples. Chuck's friends, seated across from Maria, gradually began to fade away. The man who kept his cigar in his hands dozed off in his chair, resting his head on the windowsill. The perpetually disgruntled red-haired girl was talking to someone on a video link, trying to shout over the bursting eardrums, loud music. Only Chuck seemed to be perfectly sober and listened with interest to Maria, who, out of politeness, was trying to maintain a place that was inappropriate for such a place. Small talk. I suggest we continue our evening with a stroll through Los Angeles at night, which is beautiful, especially through the limo window. Chuck covered Maria's palm with his broad, large hand. Unfortunately, I can't. Maria tried to speak calmly and respectfully, but a tremor in her voice gave her away. She tried to free her hand, but the man's hand only squeezed her palm harder. "Baby, you better calm down," Chuck whispered unpleasantly, smiling, seeing the girl's frightened look. "Once again, I like you, and I want you to come with me. I never take no for an answer. So we're going to go outside now, get into my limo, and drive to my place. I'd like to avoid the heart-wrenching scenes and the hysterics. You're a smart girl, aren't you?" "Yes, of course," Maria mumbled. "That's good," Chuck said with satisfaction. He reached over to the opposite couch to grab a large black suitcase of papers. Seeing that the man's attention had shifted for a second, Maria jumped up abruptly from the leather chair and ran toward the exit of the club, trying to get through the crowds of people. She turned her feet every now and then, shod in sleek, high stiletto-heeled shoes. Bending over to kick them off her feet, Maria felt someone's hand on her shoulder. A girl dancing. In front of her stood some unfamiliar young man wearing bright blue sunglasses. He was dancing in place and moving his arms vigorously. "No, I am." And then Maria saw Chuck coming toward her through the cluster of people. The girl ran in the opposite direction. Suddenly, she found herself in front of a dark corridor leading to the staff wing. The exit from the club was now very far away, and Maria moved determinedly towards the room where they always changed clothes. It was empty, and Maria breathed a sigh of relief. Now she would lock the door and try to escape through the window. The fact that it wasn't just Chuck looking for her anymore. The girl had no doubt at that very second. The door swung open abruptly. On the threshold stood Chuck. "And here you are." His voice stood angry and did not bode well. Maria staggered back in horror, immediately springing to action. The man grabbed her by the hair and brought all lips to the very ear, hissed, "No one dare make a fool of me. You got it." Tears rolled down the girl's cheeks from pain and fear. Her heart was pounding in her head with the noise of her free hand. Chuck tried to tear her dress off, but Maria fought back desperately. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a bottle of champagne left on the table. The events unfolded rapidly, fumbling for the neck of the bottle. Maria grabbed it firmly with her hand and with all her strength hit Chuck on the head. The man staggered suddenly and slowly slid to the floor. Maria looked in horror at the man prostrate on the floor, blood trickling from his head. He did not move. "What have you done?" Her stupor was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Sam. "You have no idea who he is. What's gonna happen to you now?" Drying Dora's breadcrumbs. At his shouting, the entire club staff came running. Shocked by the scene, they stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter. Someone called the police. Everything after that was a blur. Maria was handcuffed and roughly pushed into a patrol car. They took her to the station. "I told you everything. He tried to rape me. I defended myself. Let me make a call." Maria sat in the office. The interrogators tried to patiently answer his questions. "Maria, it's not that simple. Are you charged with murder? As far as I know, you spent all evening and all night at the dead man's table. What was your purpose in doing so?" Did you have a prior relationship with her or perhaps an acquaintance? The questions came one after another, but Maria was tormented and tormented by only one. Why? Why did this happen to me? I could have avoided it. I could have avoided going to that nightclub. I could have avoided sitting next to that Chuck. Thought, shaken girl. So until we've questioned all the witnesses, you'll stay here for at least 24 hours until all the circumstances are clarified. Interrupted her musings the voice of a policeman. You can make one call. When Maria saw Thomas, she burst into tears and rushed to him. He hugged her silently, but in his gaze she could hardly cover the horror and hopelessness. I can't believe it, he began. Why did you sit at his table? Did you want to go to him? Bitter disappointment overwhelmed Maria and tears came to her eyes again. You don't believe me either, she asked bluntly. Maria, why are you so blunt? Understand, it is very difficult for me to accept the fact that my fiancé is accused of murder. The young man began to rub his temples with effort. I need a good lawyer. Thomas, please inform my friend Emily. Maria started, got up from her chair, and headed for the door. Thomas looked at her confusedly. My dear, how nice to see you. Emily threw herself on her friend's neck as soon as she entered, and you don't even judge me like everyone else around you. I'm a murderer. Maria grinned bitterly. Maria, he's not dead. Chuck, in the intensive care unit, the condition is consistently serious, but the doctors say that he will recover. So you're not a murderer. Emily hugged her friend. It's gonna be okay. We'll prove it was self-defense. Remember, I told you about my man. He's a good lawyer. We're gonna get you out. Maria. For the first time in days, Maria had hope. She didn't want to believe she was going to jail. And all the things she'd been working towards for so long would be buried forever. Her dreams and goals, something that could hold up under all of life's hardships. Her entire life before coming to Los Angeles ran before her eyes. No, I shouldn't give up. This is not what I've come this far for. The girl thought decisively. People don't even realize that one of the most important values in life is hope. By giving it, you can make a person the happiest, not just kill them. She suddenly remembered the words of David, her doctor, who had helped her so much. Maria, I want you to know that you have a huge indestructible strength, which will always help you in life, and you will cope with any situation and become even stronger. Just say, I am strong. I am strong. Maria whispered, You have visitors upstairs. The guard's loud voice interrupted her already shallow sleep. All night the girl could not sleep a wink, and only in the morning she dozed off. Maria sat in the visiting room, impatiently waiting for Emily and the lawyer. When Maria's door finally opened. Hello, baby. Look who I brought you. These are your lawyers. My favorite man. Come meet Emily. But Maria's gaze was directed past her. Jacob was standing right in front of her. They looked at each other like that, not believing their eyes. Maria suddenly turned pale and began to faint. Emily and Jacob barely had time to pick her up. It's okay. I feel better already. Really, Vic. The girl sat down on a chair and began to drink the water that the guard brought. You're just looking at each other like that, like you're looking at a ghost. Do you two know each other? Emily was surprised. No, we are strangers, Maria said, looking directly into Jacob's eyes, from which he looked away. The first thing we'll do, Maria, is get you released on your own recognizance. Jacob finally pulled himself together, and his voice regained confidence. To do that, I need a full account of the incident, including even the smallest details. I'll come by tomorrow, and we'll discuss everything. Thank you, my love. I knew you wouldn't say no. Emily reached for Jacob's lips. I have to go. Maria averted her gaze and rose abruptly from the chair. See you tomorrow, Maria, said Jacob. See you tomorrow, Jacob, replied the girl with a long voice. Without looking at him, machine, whispered Jacob. Barely had the girl time to enter the visiting room. He jumped up from the chair he was sitting on, walked over to her, wanted to hug her, but Maria stopped him with a look. Don't, she said quietly. sitting down on the bench. Another sleepless night reflected on her face in a bad way. Her neck was reddened, her eyes merged in their depths, reflecting some kind of boundless despair and sharpened pain. Jacob's heart clenched. "Mash, I managed to get you released today. Not this before the trial, but I will do everything possible and impossible to have you recognized as innocent." She was silent, not reacting in any way to his words. "I've been looking for you all this time. Why did you run away? Run away?" Maria looked at him bitterly. "You deceived me all the time. You had a fiancé, and I was just a toy. I saw everything when I came to your house. That day your mother opened the door for me. You were all sitting around the table. That girl, she was sitting next to you." Mash, wait, what girl? Jacob started to begin, but suddenly became silent and looking somewhere in the window, not seeing with his gaze. "I think I'm beginning to understand my mother. She knows no boundaries when it comes to achieving her own goals, and one of them is her manic passion to make me happy and successful. The latter she places even above her certainty that she is the one who knows what is best for me. That night I came home after work and found my parents sitting at the holiday table and this girl in my apartment. My mom had chosen a very extravagant way to arrange a bride sighting for the bride she thought was perfect for me. Except I didn't know that. I sat there for a decent hour or so, apologized, and drove to your place. I knocked, I called. Nobody opened the door. But why? Why didn't you say anything to me when you came into the apartment? Did you really think I'd do that to you?" The tension and stress of the last few days had taken its toll. Maria covered her face with her hands and sobbed desperately. Jacob silently embraced her and stroked her head. "How happy am I to have found you again," he whispered, kissing her crying eyes and cheeks. "Now I won't give you to anyone. What about Emily Maria?" She looked at him with a testing look. From her blue eyes penetrated to the very soul. "She's my friend. I can't lie to her. She'll hate me." Maria cried again. "I'll tell her myself." Surely Jacob's voice, as always, calmed Maria down. "Let's go. She's waiting for us. You can't go anywhere right now, and it's better not to go out until everything is settled. Chuck is a well-known man, and the information must have leaked everywhere by now." Hearing the doorbell ring, Emily ran out to meet them, hugging them, happy to count at last the dearest people. Next to me in the middle of the room stood a chic-decorated table with a white tablecloth, on which flaunted appetizing appetizers. "What are we celebrating?" Jacob asked with surprise, sitting down at the table next to the mayor's office. "There is still a lot of work to be done before the trial is over. Open the champagne soon, darling. Another nail is delayed, but we'll start without it for now." Emily was all radiant as she raised her glass. She smiled and fixed a little nervously, knocking a strand of hair out of her hairdo. "In general, I am not good at beautiful toasts and solemn speeches. I am a simple person, and so I will say as simply as possible, I am so happy to see you, and I am pregnant." At the last word, the glass fell out of Jacob's hands and hit the glossy floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. Luckily, Emily was happy and rushed to hug her friend and Jacob, not noticing their stupor. "Beloved, you are going to be a daddy soon." The ringing of the doorbell brought them back to reality. Thomas stood on the doorstep. "Maria, I'm sorry I couldn't meet you." In his hands was a huge bouquet of their favorite white roses. "But I have a good reason." Emily ran to greet the guest. They whispered something joyfully discussed and didn't notice dead silence appearing in the room, oppressing the silence with its doom and flying in the air shards of someone's broken dreams. "Maria, can you hear me?" Somewhere in the distance, as it seemed to the girl, the voice of Thomas sounded. "Introduce us to each other, please." Maria continued to stare at Thomas uncomprehendingly. There was an awkward pause. Tired the girl had so much on her. "Emily's got the light on. I'll do it. Jacob, meet Jacob. This is Maria's fiancé. Thomas, this is Jacob, my favorite man. By the way, today I found out that we're having a baby. Can you believe it? That's news. Congratulations. Thomas was truly happy. It won't be long before we'll have a baby too. We'll have a baby right after the wedding. Really, Maria? Jacob looked at Maria with a hard stare and could not bear it any longer. Silently left the room. Since the early morning it had been raining nonstop, mixed with large hail, and it seemed that the leaden clouds were about to touch the ground. Flashes of lightning lit up the dark streets of the city. Upset Emily sat on a wide windowsill with a coffee cup in her hands and sadly gazing into the tightly closed window. She was wearing white underwear with thin lace, which favorably emphasized a beautiful, slender figure. Despite the slightly round stomach, evening hairstyle completed a long, transparent photo next to the mannequin did not hang a cool wedding dress with an open back, the white color of which is dazzling. Next to him was a makeup artist, finishing her evening makeup, urging the girl to take her eyes off the window and look at him. Don't be so upset. Maybe the weather will get better. The painting will be indoors anyway. Were you trying to cheer up your friend? No, but I still don't understand. All half the summer, not one consistent day. And here I don't believe in omens. But a sign like this, maybe it's a mistake. It all happened so quickly, Emily said thoughtfully. You just nervous before the wedding. As all brides took the side. Maria's look, everything will be fine. Time to get dressed. The groom will be here soon. The small, cozy, loft-style hall was located on the grounds of one of Los Angeles' historic buildings. Brick walls, high ceilings added to its authenticity, and properly organized decorated space allowed guests to feel very comfortable and immediately immersed in the atmosphere of the holiday. The wedding arch with fresh flowers, lit with garlands and candles, created a romantic atmosphere. The guests had already gathered in anticipation of the bride and groom. Maria was sitting at a table when Thomas approached her with 2 glasses of wine, one of which he handed her beautifully. Really? I should take note. Thomas, please, let's just sign everything and leave. I don't want any ceremony with a bunch of guests. Why are you embarrassed of me? No, of course not. I just don't like crowds. I remember the first time we met on the roof, you said the same thing. Maria's wedding, that's a different story. Besides, you've worked in a big nightclub too, and it didn't bother you, did it? Thomas took a sip of champagne. Why are you reminding me of something I'm trying to forget? There was annoyance in the girl's voice. Their dialogue was interrupted by a loud marching sound, and Jacob and Emily appeared in the center of the hall. The girl was glowing with happiness and smiled at Maria as they passed by. What torture is it to sit at the wedding of the man you love? In mute despair, Maria thought. Please answer me, Jacob. Do you agree to take Emily as your wife? It was heard from the stage. Jacob turned and glanced at Maria. Unable to withstand the torture, Maria got up from the table, and despite a protesting whisper, Thomas, apologizing, ran out of the hall. Left alone, she leaned her back against the front door and covered her face with her hands. Tears choked her. The rain was pouring down, and in a minute the girl was all wet, but she didn't even notice it. Suddenly, someone's hand grabbed her throat, squeezing it so tightly that Maria began to choke, desperately trying to struggle. The girl flailed her arms and legs, tried to call for help, but only a faint wheeze escaped from her chest. After a minute, Maria lost consciousness. As soon as Maria opened her eyes and tried to look around, memory instantly bombarded her with all the events of the previous day. When she turned her head, she saw that she was lying on the concrete floor, her hands and feet bound with ropes. The girl began to panic and tried to pull the ropes off, but the knots on them were very tight. Desperate, she forcefully entered the room, which was very dark and unpleasant. It smelled of grayness. A thin strip of light shone through the narrow window. My God! I'm in the basement, Maria thought with horror. Who would want to kidnap her? And even in the most crowded place at a wedding. Who is this man? And what did he want? There were no answers to these questions. Suddenly, the creak of a step interrupted her musings. The door to the basement opened, and a bright light blinded the girl. A male silhouette appeared in the doorway. She came to her senses. The man's voice seemed very familiar to Maria. He stepped closer and Maria shrieked. It was Chuck. I see you missed him. He smirked and placed it on the floor next to the girl under her nose. I missed you too and didn't wait for the trial to be over. We didn't agree last time. Do you remember where we left off? Chuck rolled his eyes, pretending to try to remember. Yes. We stopped at the fact that you wanted to kill me too. You wanted to rape me. Maria screamed in desperation. Let me go, you hear me now. They'll be looking for me. And you'll be the first to be suspected. Let's just forget the whole thing. I'll leave this house and go my own way, and I won't tell anyone anything. I promise you. Bravo. Chuck applauded theatrically. It turns out that you're especially strong in spirit when you're up against the wall. For example, can you kill a man with a champagne bottle? Or now you're making your own terms, bound hand and foot, lying on the floor in a damp basement. Now, you listen to me. You have nowhere else to go. In a few days, your charred remains will be found, and their identity will be confirmed by forensics, which belongs to me. And from that moment on, you will cease to exist. For all your friends and relatives, you will exist only for me, and for me alone. This is your home now, Maria. I don't want to keep you in this cellar. And if you are a good girl and do not do anything stupid, but behave well, I will let you out of this cellar. You will live in the best room of this house and do whatever you like here. Noticing that the girl didn't protest, Chuck moved closer and produced a plate of food from under her nose. So be a good girl and eat first. Before he could say anything, the plate was knocked out of his hands. Kicking Maria's leg, sick asshole. Let me out of here, screamed the girl, waving her bound hands and feet. Shut up, you hysterical bitch, Chuck screamed. And with all his might he slapped Maria on the cheek. Maria lost consciousness from the painful shock. When she opened her eyes again, she felt intense pain. Her arms and legs were numb. Her head ached so badly that any movement caused and suffering. The small window upstairs was pierced by dawn. In a vain attempt to untie the ropes, Maria looked around herself. It would be nice to find something sharp to cut them with, the girl thought. She had lost track of time, and now she couldn't even imagine how long she had been here. A day, maybe a few days. Cursing herself for her intemperance, Maria began to think about how she would get out of here. The worst solution was to piss Chuck off. Now there was no telling when he would come again. At all costs, she needs to get out of the basement and get upstairs. There she would call for help and try to escape. Her musings were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. The door opened and Maria was blinded by a beam of artificial light. Chuck called out to her, but it wasn't Chuck. An unfamiliar, tall man silently placed a tray of plates beside her, took a mug of water and handed it to Maria. She began to drink greedily, and stopping to catch her breath, whispered, "Please call Chuck. I want to talk." The man still silently took the empty mug from her and headed for the exit. The door closed behind him. It was more than an hour before the sound of approaching footsteps was heard near the door. Something I wanted to say. Chuck was standing in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, staring at her. "I didn't mean to act like that, and I apologize," Maria said quietly. Chuck remained silent. "Promise me it won't happen again. Please divorce me. I can't feel my body," Maria cried. The man walked over to her and, taking a knife from his back pocket, one by one cut the ropes binding her. Maria tried to stand up on her former legs, but they did not obey her, and she almost fell to the floor. Chuck, who managed to pick up the girl on his arm, carefully carried her toward the exit. They climbed up the long staircase and found themselves in a large empty hallway of the house, where there was some furniture and some paintings hanging on the walls. Without stopping, Chuck began to climb even higher, and when the long, wide staircase ended, he turned toward the rooms. Opening one of them, he placed Maria on a large bedroom bed that stood against the wall. "This is your room now. Your food will be brought to you here in a closet of clothes in your size." The bath has everything you could possibly need. And don't be silly, there are cameras everywhere in the house. I can see them from my cell phone on the exit guard outside your door, my man. Chuck said dryly. I'll be gone for a couple days. A few hours of sleep gave. There is strength. She got out of bed and headed for the bathroom. The marble-on beige room with gilded plumbing was very spacious. A large lighted mirror hung on the wall in an open closet, neatly stacked, and white fluffy towels lay on the wall. Maria opened the faucet, and the bathroom began to fill quickly with water, sinking into the airy foam all the way to her chin. The girl felt relaxed for the first time in the last few days. She closed her eyes, and in front of them, one by one, images began to pop up. Here she was standing at Jacob and Emily's wedding, watching her favorite man marry someone else. It seemed like it could be worse. Turns out it could. You could wake up in a basement, bound hand and foot in the house of your enemy who had kidnapped you. Zah, back in her terry cloth robe, came out of the bathroom, surprised to find near the window a table set for one person, which was literally left with various delicacies in a deep plate. There was still warm soup available. Nearby, several kinds of salad and appetizers of fish and meat, a small number of types of cheese with nuts and honey, sandwiches with red fish and caviar, and a choice of several second courses, the names of which Maria didn't know. Tiptoeing to the front door, Maria tried to see through the keyhole. It was dark and quiet. She went to the table again, sat down on the edge of the chair, looked around, and began cautiously eating. There was no appetite, but eating made her feel much better. Going to the window, the girl saw below a large wide yard covered with a perfectly smooth green lawn, between which could be seen and paved with decorative bricks paths leading to the building. Just outside the front porch of the house was a roofed gazebo with a long table and a Mongolian inside area. In the middle of the courtyard was a fountain with a white sculpture of a mermaid, around which there were several benches. A little farther away there was a pool with birch-colored water, near which several deck chairs with umbrellas stood in a row. All this splendor, including a 4-story house, on the last floor of which was Maria's room, was hidden from prying eyes by a huge 3-meter fence, behind which there was an endless forest with a single asphalt road. Not a single neighbor's house, not even someone to call for help. Maria thought bitterly. Her gaze fell on the bed. Even if she made scraps of sheets, blankets, it would not be enough for a rope to climb down to the first floor. And even if it was enough, how would she get over that huge fence? Realizing the hopelessness of her situation, Maria burst into loud tears. She ran to the front door and pounded desperately at it with her hands and feet. You open up. I know you're behind that door. You're going to jail for kidnapping and restraining a man against his will. Let me out now. I'm losing my mind. The girl screamed. The door opened gently, and Maria saw the same tall man who had brought her food in the basement. Stop this at once, or I'll have to tie you up with a nonchalant face, said her guard. Well, can I at least take a walk in the garden? Maria came out sobbing. In response, the door closed and the turning of the key in the keyhole was heard. Suddenly, Maria heard the sound of a cell phone coming from the back of the room. She went to that sound, and when she opened the door of one of the lockers, she was surprised to find a cell phone bursting with ringing. Not realizing anything, the girl picked up the phone. Again, a scandal. Chuck's voice came from the phone. I warned you that one more such behavior and you'll go to the basement. I'll be home tonight and invite you to dinner. Closet, pick out a suitable evening gown at 7:00 p.m. You have to be ready. There was a short beep on the phone and it disconnected. Maria scrutinized the phone and tried to dial the police number and one by one the numbers of Jacob, Emily, and Thomas. The device looked more like a walkie-talkie with one-way communication, and all her attempts were met with a no-network message on the screen. Maria opened her clothes closet and began to look through its contents. There were tops, skirts of various colors, several cocktail dresses, one of which was obscenely short, a couple of tracksuits, jeans, also underwear and swimsuits. Maria's hand first reached for the cozy house suits, but she, afraid of incurring Chuck's wrath again, pulled out all the evening gowns and spread them out on the bed. A revealing one with a deep neckline. The girl didn't even bother trying it on, opting for a simple mid-length black dress. She opened the shoe closet to match it with her shoes. Surprised by the number of shoes, she could not resist brightly small daughters on stilettos. For any reflection in the mirror, Maria smiled involuntarily, as if from a magazine cover, she thought. At exactly 7 p.m., the door to her room opened, and Chuck walked in. He was wearing a black suit and a white shirt underneath. With a satisfied look at Maria's outfit, he held out his hand to her, and they walked out of the room. Walking through the huge hallway, they turned down the dining room where a set table, decorated with romantic candles and fresh flowers, was already waiting. Sitting across from Chuck, Maria stared blankly at the room, trying to memorize it in great detail. Chuck poured wine into glasses, without taking his eyes off the girl. "You are very beautiful," he said shamelessly, looking at her bare shoulders in her evening dress. At that moment, an elderly woman entered the dining room with a large dish in her hands. She silently put it on the middle of the table and also, without saying a word, left. "I have to go to the bathroom." Maria hastily got up from the table and headed was following the woman on. Chuck gestured to stop her toilet in the other direction. "And if I find out that you've approached my domestic helper, I have to upset you. You will be punished very severely." Back from the ladies' room, Maria could hardly hide her dismay as she tried, no matter how hard she tried, to find her way out of the house. It was all to no avail. "Maria, I want you to finally realize that everything in this house has been thought out. The only way out of here is with your feet, and the sooner you stop making a fool of me, accepting your situation, the better it will be for you." He slowly got up from his chair, walked over to her, and put his hands on her shoulders. Maria noticed that they were very hot. She fearfully let go of the fork she was eating and squirmed in her chair, noticing that she was shivering. Chuck laughed. "Don't be afraid. You're not going to get raped by me." He sat down next to her on a neighboring chair, and then in the club was not going to. "He was just trying to scare me. But you beat me to it. You can live here in peace and not be afraid. I'll wait for you to come to me." Chuck flashed his eyes, but his voice was perfectly calm. "In the meantime, from tomorrow, you can move freely around the house, swim in the pool, walk in the garden. There's an online movie theater and a small library on the first floor. If you need any books, all you have to do is ask Andrew." He called out, and at the same second the familiar Maria entered the room. The man escorted the girl to her room. Until dawn, Maria could not sleep a wink. All night she thought up different escape plans. In the morning, the girl dozed off and began to have nightmares. How she was running away from Chuck, trying to get out of the gate, but as if she was always running in the same circle. Back in the hallway of the house and everywhere, she is haunted by Chuck's sinister laughter. When Maria opened her eyes, the sun was already shining brightly, oblivious to her shattered state from the sleepless night. She quickly took a cold shower, put on the first closet find she could find, a swimsuit, and a minute later she was already knocking on the front door. "Andrew, I want to see the house." They walked down the wide staircase to the first floor and into her library with its fireplace and leather armchairs. Maria gazed admiringly at several rows of books and, stopping at the psychology section, began to pull out one by one. "I think I'll come back here." Later, Maria realized and asked me to escort her to the courtyard. The fresh air and the illusion of freedom had an effect on her. The courtyard looked very green and well maintained. Trying not to arouse suspicion under the guise of a walk, the girl tried to get closer to the gate and take a closer look. "I thought you were going swimming." The guard stopped her. "And you were going to watch," Maria parried. Did she embarrass Andrew a little? She walked to the pool, quickly threw off her dress, and jumped into the water. The water was warm and pleasant, and after doing a few breaststroke mushrooms, she flipped over onto her back and continued her slow swim. "And let's spare the kebabs," shouted Maria Andrew, who was watching her without a break. "I want a feast." "I think that's a great idea," she heard Chuck's voice behind her. "I wish I could join you. I'm leaving." He got into the car and pressed the alarm button. The gate slowly opened, and in a few seconds Maria had time to see through the thick strip of mixed woods to the reflections of water. Behind the woodland you could see the river. "How long have you been working here?" Maria asked, cutting a juicy piece of chicken with a knife. She continued to eat without even counting on an answer. "I've been with Chuck for almost 20 years. He helped my mother, cured her dry," answered Andrew. Next stretched a succession of days, similar to each other as two drops of water. Maria spent most of the day in the library or walking in the garden. Every once in a while he would show up. Chuck spent a little time with her and left immediately. Everywhere, even by the pool, she was accompanied by the silent Andrew. While she swam, he sat on a chaise lounge and kept his eyes on her. Whatever she asked for, the girl immediately fulfilled everything, except for a walk in the woods, which she had been begging Maria, her guard, for a week now. "Andrew, I need new books," the girl said. "Go to the city to the list. I'll write to you." "Okay, but you stay in your room. Let's go." Andrew got up from his chair to escort the girl and lock her in her room. "Please don't take me away," the girl pleaded. "I feel so good here by the fireplace. Where would I run away to? Think about it." She pretended to yawn and tightly in the plate handed the man a handwritten list of necessary literature. "I'll be waiting for you." Andrew nodded and began to make his way down the stairs leading to the garage where several of Chuck's cars were parked. Making sure the guard could no longer hear her, Maria walked to the wide front door, opened it, and looking around, rushed toward the gate, where several thick spruce trees were growing in a row, hidden between the trees and the fence. Holding her breath, Maria waited for Andrew's car. A minute later, a large black Jeep pulled up. The guard pressed the remote control, and the gate began to open slowly. "This is the moment," Maria thought, and jumped 6 hid next to the car, avoiding the view in the side mirror. The car slowly drove out of the mansion, and the girl, moving behind it, found herself outside the mansion. It was getting dusk outside, and she had no trouble taking cover in a crevice of the woods. A maddening, explaining feeling of freedom swept over Maria, and she darted off, unable to see the road. It had all worked out, she exulted. All that remained was to reach some settlement. Her joy was dampened by the thought of what would happen to Andrew. After all, she had used his trust to escape. Maria promised herself that as soon as she was safe, she would take care of him right away. Maria had been walking through the empty forest for hours. It had long since gotten dark, and she finally came to a paved road. "I'll stop some hitchhiker and call the police right away," the girl thought. There was complete darkness all around, and the huge forest seemed ominous. She felt uneasy. She shuddered and shoved herself tighter. She had hastily shoved her sweater somewhere. The temperature was getting lower and lower, and she was already struggling to keep warm. "I can handle anything. Just keep going." Maria tried to calm herself down. She suddenly remembered how in her childhood she and her grandmother went on a picnic in the forest, and without listening to Adriana's instructions. The girl had lost sight of her and gotten lost. All despair, fear, and hopelessness instantly took possession of her. But her grandmother Sam suddenly surfaced clearly from the hidden corners of Maria's memory. Never, and no one would let herself be broken. Not to the forest, not to man. "You are strong, and always remember that." In the sky, the dawn was already slightly dawning, when Maria suddenly heard a sound coming from the car. Turning around, she stopped and stared intently at the beginning of the winding road. But the light of the approaching headlights blinded her. "The important thing is that people notice me and don't drive past me," it flashed through her mind. "Stop, help." Maria ran out into the middle of the road and waved her arms. Attracting attention, the car was rapidly approaching her. And when the headlights fully illuminated the girl, slowly stopped, the driver's door opened, and Chuck stepped out of the car. He had a gun in his hands. Maria screamed wildly and rushed back into the woods. "But what were you scared of?" "Baby, I've been coming for you all night while you're still running around in the field." Maria heard the click of a bolt of a gun. She hid behind a tree and tried to catch her breath, not to lose sight of the man. "You did good, Maria. Outsmarted everyone and got away. Too bad about Andrew. He was a good man. Now his death is on your conscience." Covering her mouth with the palm of her hand, Maria cried silently. 20 years he was by my side. Never once let me down." Chuck continued, listening after each phrase and aiming at the darkness of the forest. "How will she survive his death now? Are you a murderer?" Unable to bear it, the girl screamed. And immediately next to her body a bullet, almost hitting her, Maria rushed into the thicket of the forest. She heard Chuck running after her, and panic seized her. Every now and then she bumped into tree roots and colleagues sticking out everywhere. She ran without stopping. Her throat was dry, her heart was pounding desperately, and tree branches were hitting her face painfully, but she didn't stop. "I have to find the nearest settlements before dawn, or he will find me and kill me." In desperation, Maria thought. She stopped to catch her breath and listen. The forest was silent. Only the rustle of the leaves and the rustle of the wind could be heard. Fatigue came over her with such force that her legs gave out, and she leaned against the wide trunk of a huge tree and closed her eyes for a moment. Where to run to next? Which way was the city, and how to get out of the forest? There were too many questions, and there was less and less strength left. Suddenly, she remembered the river she had seen from the mansion. "We have to find her," Maria thought. In the same second, a crushing blow to the head knocked her to the ground. "You shouldn't have played with me." Chuck grabbed her by the hair and pulled her up to him. "I told you, the only way to get away from me is forward feet." He threw her to the ground and laughed, enjoying her helplessness. Maria tried to stand on her kicking leg, making her squirm in pain. "Did you have everything you wanted? Ungrateful bitch." The blows came one after another, but she was no longer in pain. His voice grew quieter and quieter until it was gone. A dark shroud covered her. Somewhere in the distance voices were heard. "She must be hospitalized or she will die. We can't take her to the hospital. You're a doctor. Do whatever you have to do, but only here. I've ordered all the necessary drugs and instruments to be brought in. If she lives, I'll deposit a large sum of money into your account." "Doctor," the voices are gone. "Maria, my girl, what happened to you?" Maria heard Adriana's dear voice. "Grandma, I'm so sick. I want to come to you." "Hold me," Maria whispered with broken lips. "No, you can't. Maria, you have to fight." Opening her eyes, Maria saw a man leaning over her to give her an injection. She wanted to turn around, but the sharp pain of the city cage pierced through her. "Hush, girl. No need to move. Your ribs are broken. I'm going to give you injections now, and you're going to shove again." "Doctor." Treating her arm with an alcohol wipe, Maria lay in bed. Weak, pale, racked with pain, her head and her whole body felt as if it had been cut with a knife. The rare hours when she regained consciousness were a real torture for her. One day when she opened her eyes again, she saw the assistant holding a plate. "Come on, Maria. Do you need a sip of broth? It will help you recover." The woman spoke softly, raising the spoon to Maria's lips. The girl moaned softly and turned her head back to the wall. Any thought of anything but cold water made her cringe. Suddenly, the door opened and Chuck walked in. Maria began to choke. "Hadn't you better go?" the doctor said sharply and closed the door behind him. Several weeks passed. Maria sat by the window and stared blankly at her surroundings. There were snowflakes outside the window. She shifted her gaze to a chair and, taking a book in her hands, immersed herself in reading. An assistant came into the room and began to clear the dishes from the table. "At last you have a good appetite." She was happy to see that the girl had eaten all the dinner in the kitchen. "There's a warm meat pie waiting for you. If you don't want me anymore, I'll go home." That's what she asked for tonight. "My daughter and grandchildren are coming, of course, and the kids." "Thank you very much," Maria smiled. Maria dreamed that she was running through the burning forest. All around was an unbearable smell of burning smoke. With great speed, the fire was spreading through the branches of the trees and through the grass, devouring everything around. It seemed to her that in another minute the flames would touch her bare feet. It was getting unbearably hot, and she began to suffocate. "Maria, wake up." Some man frantically shaking her unsuccessfully. Trying to wake her up, she opened her eyes and saw Andrew. "Jesus, Andrew, I thought he killed you," she shouted, hugging the guard. "He almost did. I was in the basement the whole time, but I managed to get out." "Maria, listen to me carefully. We don't have much time. The mansion is on fire and is about to explode. There are gas tanks in the basement. We have to get out of here immediately." It's only now that Maria realized it wasn't a dream. And the house really smelled like burning, and the temperature was already unbearable. Smoke was coming from the next room, and the curtains in the room were embraced by tongues of flame. Andrew and Maria rushed to the stairs, which was already all on fire, holding their breath. They cautiously made their way down to the exit. When they were on the second floor, the charred staircase collapsed with a crash right under their feet. "Jump!" Grabbing the girl's arm, Andrew shouted and pushed off with his legs, dragging her with him, hitting her leg painfully. Maria groaned. "I think I broke it." Andrew picked the girl up in his arms and rushed towards the exit. His eyes were black, and it was hard to see. But the guard, confidently reaching the front door, pushed it open with his foot. "Sam God, it's not jammed," he yelled, ran up to the car standing at the gate. Andrew hurriedly opened the front door and gently put the girl in. He started the car and sharply pressed on the gas, declaring she touched down. Maria turned around and looked at the fifth house in flames. Suddenly, some movement on the first floor caught her attention, and looking closer, she saw Chuck standing there looking at her. "Stop!" the girl screamed. "Maria, the house is going to explode. There's nothing we can do to help him." Andrew hit the gas even harder, and the car sped off toward the gate. Within seconds, they were smashed by the armored hood of the tearing car. Barely had she gotten a safe distance away, there was a deafening explosion. For hours on end, they drove in silence, slumped over, staring at the endless winding road that disappeared under the hood of the car. Andrew was the first to break the silence. "We'll get to Los Angeles soon. Do you remember where your friend lives?" Maria nodded affirmatively, and her heart sank desperately. It seemed that this nightmare was over. With hope in her voice, she said and looked at Andrew. "What are you going to do next? Go back to Los Angeles?" "No, I can't go back to Los Angeles. I can't go anywhere right now. It's gonna be a long investigation. And even though there's no evidence left, I'll probably be a suspect." He took a cigarette out of his pack and flicked on the lighter. He took a deep drag. It was already late morning, when familiar streets and squares flashed before Magi. Los Angeles was all white. Standing along the road, faintly decorated with LED garlands, created a festive atmosphere. Andrew stopped the car in front of the house. "Goodbye, Maria." He hugged her tightly. "Thank you," Carr whispered. For a moment, she held her gaze and pushed the door open. Only after the third ring Maria heard the lock click. The door slowly opened, and she saw Emily, who could not utter a word, staring at her like a ghost. "Oh my God, Maria." She had regained her speech, but she couldn't comprehend what was happening. "We thought you were dead." She hugged her friend tightly, and at the same time she fumbled for her, as if she still doubted she was alive. Where have you been?" "Vic, it's a long story. I'm really tired. Let's sit down." "Sure, darling. I'll make you some hot tea now. Tell me how you're doing, Jacob. You were supposed to be due a long time ago. Where's the baby?" He's sleeping. Emily turned slowly toward her, leaning against the wall. Her face contorted in pain. Son, he didn't make it. I went into premature labor. The baby turned out to be non-viable. Jacob and I tried to cope for a long time, but we only became strangers. He was staying late at work more and more, giving legal advice on the weekends, and I was alone the whole time. Only one person supported me. That's Thomas. Anyway, Thomas and Jacob, caught us together. After that, he packed his bags and filed for divorce. Emily burst into tears. Maria, will you ever forgive me? The girl held out her hands to her friend. Where is he? Where is who? Thomas? Emily was surprised. No, Jacob. He lives in his apartment there. Maria, what's going on? Where are you running to? Shrieked Emily, seeing that the girl rushed to the exit. Finally, the phrases drowned out the sound. Slamming the door, Los Angeles streets were passing in front of her with lightning speed. But even those minutes seemed like an eternity. That's what happens when it's like living 1,000,000 years to arrive at your dream. Hundreds of times you imagine what would have happened if circumstances had not once again prevented you from being together. And when you're close enough to your happiness that you can just reach out and touch it, it disappears like a beautiful dream with the morning dawn. And then you are desperate and powerless. Your soul is empty and you can't fight anymore. Do you feel like you've given up? All you have left is the faint flame of hope that smolders inside. And it is the darkest hour for your soul that fate suddenly favors you with a wonderful gift. The happiness of a dream come true. A tall blonde woman in an elegant office dress found the spacious building. She took the elevator to the 71st floor and pushed open the glass office door. Good morning, Maria. Your coffee's on the table. The patient will be here in 5 minutes. The secretary smiled and immediately picked up the ringing phone. Maria Psychological Help Center. What can I do for you? Maria walked into a spacious office with a small cozy sofa in the middle and an armchair standing opposite. Taking out of the cabinet a large black folder with the inscription, she sat down in the chair and delved into the reading. The case history, which she had reread dozens of times. Maria always amazed her. A teenage girl from a dysfunctional family who managed to keep from suicide. A year of therapy had yielded very good results. Maria pondered. There was a knock on the door and a young girl of about 16 entered the room. She smiled warmly at Maria and sat down across from her. So, Kelly, today is our last session with you. You did great, she said proudly. You have done a lot of work since we met, and you are ready to go on your own. What conclusions have you drawn? You know, Maria, when I came to you, my heart was full of hatred for the people who met on my way. The girl said thoughtfully. Many of them wished me harm, and my life sometimes hung in the balance. The trials I have had to overcome have left scars in my soul, but I love those scars. They remind me of you know what? My strength, my journey, that the world is multifaceted, and that you should not expect only bad things from it. Maria secretly brushed away the tears in her eyes. She listened to her, holding her breath, and in the end you realize that it is worth fighting and living for the sake of beautiful moments, and those people who meet on your way, those who are dearest to you in the world. Your favorite people. There was a knock at the door, and without waiting for an answer, it swung open and a little blonde girl of about 5 years old ran into the office. Without any preamble, she jumped into Maria's lap, hugged her mom tightly. I'm sorry it's a bad time. I missed you so much. We missed you, a man's voice added, and Jacob walked into the office. Kelly, this is my husband Jacob and daughter Adriana, excited and embarrassed. Maria introduced them at the same time. I'm sorry. What are you doing here? Kelly, you did not have time to finish, and we just finished. The girl smiled, looking at the hugging happiness of the family, and her eyes brightened. We talked about the importance of any obstacles on your life path. It is because of them that you consider your strength and your happiness.